Good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us for this fair housing webinar that's going to address our protected classes. It is fantastic that we have with us two panelists. We have Susan Lynn Summers, who is our current New York State Association Chair of the Fair Housing Committee, and Moses Seuram, who's our past President of New York State Association of Realtors 2019. They have taken time out of their busy day to have a discussion with us about fair housing, what they think, what they understand, and hopefully it's going to be a free-flowing conversation because I have not provided them with any questions. I believe anybody on this platform should know what they're talking about, should be able to express themselves and be able to do it very well. What I'd like to say from the beginning though is right now we are going to be talking fair housing, but I wanted to say for purposes of discussion, this is going to be a safe space for us to talk freely about fair housing and try to explain and express our thoughts without discriminatory notes there. Nobody feeling bad that they're being discriminated against, and we can talk freely about what's going on. We do know that with regards to fair housing, it is among the most cherished of civil rights, in that we have the right to live where one chooses. And we know that this is important because the law says we have that ability to do so. So what we are going to do that and know and address is that people are free to choose where they want to live. This is not about us as real estate agents guiding or suggesting to people what's better for them. What I would like us to think about is whether or not this housing, fair housing, is truly fair. I want to go back to some additional housekeeping, which I will address later, that this webinar is being recorded, and we are going to share that with everybody at the end of the session. So I'll come back to all of that. What we want to address is what the protected classes are. Do we know them? And I'm going to deal mostly with the federal because we have state and local or municipalities have different protections that are added, but we want to discuss the federal protected classes. We want to consider race. We're going to talk about race, color, religion, sex or gender, national origin, familial status, and handicaps or disability. We're going to address each and every one of those, and we're going to try to understand how this came about. But more importantly, to my fellow realtors, we want to make sure that we know that we are going to be in compliance, and we're going to do our best to be in compliance. We know that when Civil Rights Act of 1866 came into play, it prohibited anything to do with racial discrimination. We also know as realtors that if we violate 1866, we are going straight to federal court. There is nothing in between. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 added, anything to do with discrimination in federally financed housing, doing FHA, VA loans, etc. We will have that coming up next week, and that will be an in-depth discussion on that also. In addition to that, the amendments that came into play in 1968 added race, color, religion, and national origin. There was an expansion of the Civil Rights Act. All of these protected classes help us know that we have to be in compliance when we do our work and our job, showing homes. We are not gatekeepers, but we open the door and allow people in. We first see a color before we see somebody's heart, but color should never be an option or consideration when we do business. Adding to that, 1974 added sex or gender. Again, I teach the course and I'm always asking, why do any of these things have any impact on how we sell real estate? So finally, we're going to talk about the 1988 amendments that added familial status and disability. All of these protections are in place to make sure that we do our job, or we try to do our job, and we do our jobs very well. Again, we have the federal law, state law, county laws, and the local laws. As I said, there are so many things that make up the whole basket called fair housing, and it's highly unwieldy. We will touch on steering, we will touch a bit on blockbusting, and of course we will talk about redlining and making sure that we again stay within the lines. As a matter of just a quick note, this was a quick overview so that you know where you are. It is a fair housing webinar. We will be discussing everything, and I'm going to go back to our panelists to get started to make sure that we know where we are and what we're talking about. So let me go back to my screen here and stop my share. I'm back to everybody here. Before we begin officially, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Moses and about Susan Lynn Summers. Everybody's got a 3-page bio. Of course, I'm not going to read it all, so I'm going to give them the opportunity to tell a little bit about themselves. Of course, Suzanne, we're going to start with you as our New York State Association of Realtors current chair 2021. What are your goals for your position as you see it?
Good morning to all, and thank you, Dorothy, very much for the honor of being on this panel. My goal for this year with Fair Housing, along with my co-chair, is to expand knowledge among realtors as to what they need to be doing on a daily basis to make sure that they are quite aware of what fair housing is and what they need to do to make sure that they are in compliance with it. So there'll be, discussions on love letters. We had in the fall, we had a panel and we discussed stories from the street that was great. And we talked about the kind of things that have happened over the years. And people, one of the things that we talk about all the time is people don't, I always hear realtors surprised that there are fair housing, that today there are so many problems with fair housing and so many issues with fair housing. Well, it happens every day in every single market that people are discriminated against. And until we wrap our brains around that fact, and we don't, and we continue to live with our heads in the sand, then we will not be getting our goals across. So education, informing people. Charlie Oppler, our president of National Association of Realtors, has made fair housing his focus of his presidency. So there are lots of different ways that we can get our realtors educated to make sure that they're aware of things. For example, the Fairhaven course I encourage everybody to take. It's offered through NAR. You can get it, I think at my local level, they're doing it for free. So there's lots of different things that they can do. We need to talk about diversity. We need to talk about inclusion, and we need to talk about unconscious bias. There's a lot that there's so much that needs to be discussed during this year that I'm chair rather, of Fair Housing.
Well, I thank you very much. I will let you guys know out there that Susan is a truly accomplished realtor. She has been in the business for some time, and her strength, and frankly, I believe, is the directness. She does not beat about the bush. She makes her position very clear. And it's always a pleasure to have very comfortable conversations with Susan and also with Moses, because you can feel very confident in the fact that we agree to disagree, but we will come to the same solution. It doesn't matter how we get there. So this is a pleasure for me. And Moses, our 2019 past president of New York State Association of Realtors. One of the things I truly love is the fact that we established the Realtor Care Week during your presidency, which is still going on. So that is fantastic. In the meantime, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know you were born in Guyana. I was born in Ghana. People confuse the two all the time. We don't like that. We want to make sure they know where I'm from and where you're from. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you see for fair housing this year.
Well, first off, Dorothy, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I think you would understand me best because we both grew up in different parts of the world, and we've seen firsthand what discrimination is. You live it every day. But before I dive into anything further, I just wanted to say I lived the Realtor brand for 25 plus years. I have served on every and any capacity you can think of. Google me, you'll find it. I strive for fairness in anything, everything I do, because that's just how I was brought up as a child. You respect people. Today, I look at where our society has gone, and you have to wonder, have we really spun the pendulum anywhere to better mankind and where we live and what we do, or are we really going backwards? And that's a question that we have to all ask ourselves as in our daily life, as we do our profession. Are we heading in the right direction? Because we're putting laws, we're putting all these different discussions, but are the actions really taken in the roots where it needs to be taken so that change comes about? Or are we just having great PR and life goes on? That's my fight as a citizen, wanting to see where are we going as a society.
That's terrific. Um, that is really deep because we think about fair housing, and I'm going to pose a couple of questions to the people who are participating or listening to us at this time. This platform is called The Color of Real Estate. And, before I settled on this, of course, you pray about it. You have to thank God for everything. And I talked about it with my board of directors, my children. And, we have to go to the board of directors, right? The kids. And it just stayed the color of real estate. So I am trying to understand what that means to me. Everybody have put it out to say it's the color of real estate. And we still have to look at it different. It's sort of asking somebody, what does diversity mean to you? So my question before we begin is, what does the color of real estate mean to you? Susan, go ahead. What does the color of real estate mean
Well,
to you?
Dorothy, thank you for that. I guess I think every day about fair housing, because when you ask the question, what does fair housing mean to me? I'm constantly thinking about what does fair housing mean to me? It's something that came to me when I was very young, that I felt a sense of that, that justice isn't done, and it wasn't done. And I took classes. I remember classes in high school that meant so much to me. When I went to college, I remember being discriminated against as a Jewish person and hearing slander. All my life, I've heard it since I was a little kid. So it affects you on a personal level. In my business, I have seen personal discrimination stories that I could tell you that basically would make you cry. And so it means trying to fight for what I know is right and what I have. And I agree with what Moses said. The classes I took in college about this, things have gotten worse, because what it really is fair housing was one of those things that it meant something to me, because it meant something to me when I was very young also. So it's been in my heart forever. But when I look at what has happened in this country over the years, and since I was even in college, I won't go back how far, but it's been a while. And when I think about that, I think that this country has gone completely backwards.
Yeah.
And I think that, and it's because, for one thing, we've never taken fair housing seriously. It's almost like an art class in college or an art class in school. Oh, we can just leave that aside. It's not that important. And realtors, if it wasn't something that was in your heart before you started, that you took seriously when you took your basic classes, your basic 40 hours or whatever, if it didn't resonate with you then, what was done to make sure that it resonated with you as you continued your career?
Wow.
Which is what happened, I think, when finally, we had issues in Long Island, which, by the way, happens all across the country. It wasn't just Long Island. It just happened to be where there was an expose on it. But that's what fair housing means to me. It means it's deep in my heart. It's deep in my being to believe that we can make things better for all.
That's outstanding.
At
Moses,
least for
what
the
does that mean to
protected
you? What does
classes.
fair housing mean to you, Moses?
Well, Dorothy, I think I've been brought up in a home where my father was on a working farm, so we've had cattle, animals, vegetation, and that was my best friends. The animals treated me very, very well. And when I came to the United States in the early '90s, one of the first questions I got from one of the pastors is, "How is it living in the United States?" And I said, "The people here are quite strange." And he looked perplexed. And I said, "Well, they don't say hi to you in the morning when you're in the elevator. Like, everyone's about their business. And if you opened your mouth and you said something, that was wrong. Like, who are you to dare talk to me?" Now, I didn't know at that point, young as I've been then, that it may have been maybe the color of my skin. I haven't been in that environment to understand that exists in society. And I don't want to sound too hard on it, but I think what I've learned from years of living in this is that sometimes we have let things by when we should have stand up and said, "No, you don't say that to me," or you don't, So I'm at fault at one point being too polite and let it slide when it happened. And I think a good friend in the business, Liz English, I'm sure you know of her, that was one of her observations. And she's a woman that's been true fighter for fair housing and for equality for all the time that I've known her. And I think that is a true statement. But fair housing to me, Dorothy, is if you have the freedom to want to live wherever you choose. And if I'm a realtor or a practitioner in the industry, I with no biases, with nothing, with my conscience clear, I find you housing wherever you want to be because you have that freedom. You got the money, you pay it, you live where you choose to be, and there should be no outward pressure from me taking you into neighborhoods because of who you are and what your makeup is and what your lifestyle is. People should have their own consequences to where they choose to live and how they want to live.
So just following up on that a little bit. I know that, Susan had mentioned something about the expose that was done, and we agreed happens all over the country. Some of us just haven't been caught in the act yet. It's unfortunate it was in our backyard. What do you think that based on looking at that and all the flurry of new laws and legislation that New York State is looking to pass within our industry, passing laws, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't really mean anything if we don't educate our practitioners to follow through. What do you think? Follow up on that, Moses.
Well, excellent point of view, Dorothy. I think you hit it right on. We can make laws all day long. We're gonna punish innocent folks in the process because anything will come out and I see that the realtors are getting punished 10 times as bad now with laws and regulations. But I think both sides of the fence need clear education, and we saw how implicit bias and all of biases come to the table. Innocently, you may consider, oh well, this is where the masses are going. Maybe this might be the place you might like, but that is not our place to suggest or anything. People should have their free will. My clients come to me and I said, tell me where you want to live. I have no objections to anywhere. What do you know? I can give you resources where to live and where to go. But I think to go back to your question, what the debacle and all and how it was treated, there was one gentleman that stood out very clearly, and I think the lawmakers picked up on it and they let him loose very silently, but that was a strong point. Was an older gentleman with the last crew that came up and spoke, and he was so torn that he was accused to be on that. So, and his wife said to him, honey, don't worry, if they see who is in our living room with our daughters now, you should be confident that you know in your heart you are not racist and you are not biased in any way. And that spoke the loudest to me because that was a Caucasian man that was so perplexed. He was caught in the midst of this. But this is where we, as I guess an industry and a group, have to pay close attention. We're your membership. Listen to what we're saying and let's take it collectively, and don't cancel out your own because media is pushing one side of the fence. We have to give it an equal measure, and don't punish those honestly trying to make it better.
Okay, I appreciate that. Do you want to say something to that?
I hope I answer your question.
You absolutely did, and I think that you expanded on some points, which I'm going to have Susan touch on that a little bit, and then we will move on. But absolutely, you did. Go ahead, Susan. What did you think?
Two things along with that, okay? Number one is education. And again, yeah, paperwork's paperwork. People don't even know what they're signing. They don't explain things. They don't explain the anti-discrimination paperwork. They're not explaining anything. Realtors are not explaining things, but they don't understand it. So if we don't start with educating our members better, so they know what good practice is and what they're allowed to do as far as how they act in their daily business, then we're not going to get anywhere with papers. I think it's important, but if they don't know what they're here, take this paper and fill it out, you're not going to get anywhere. So you really have to do education. And there was something else, and now I can't remember what it was. So go ahead, Dorothy. It'll come to my head. On that
housing anti-discrimination form real quick, because it is a pet peeve of mine that we had this thing roll out right away, and it's supposed to be used between us and the general public. Going to mention, just to address Moses's point about punishment for us, I think we have a lot of paperwork. Now we have paperwork that tells the consumer, your realtor has to do X, Y, and Z, and if they don't, you can complain about them to this. My question always becomes, what if the consumer is the one discriminating against me? Who do I go to report them? What is my conversation with them? Because the housing anti-discrimination form that we have out there is for the consumer. What about me, the realtor, that's being discriminated against by the consumer? How do you think we should handle that?
Good question.
Dorothy, it's the same. It's the same one I made. I think someone had asked me the question. We had a panel earlier, and I said to them, "You know what it's like to live when I have to walk in a restaurant with my two kids that are born here in the United States, and I have to hide discrimination from them because I have to pick what section of the restaurant I want to sit in because I don't want them to notice that I'm being looked upon differently, or I can." As an adult, you know how difficult that is every day of your life, that you have to make that so that they don't see it and they don't get a grasp that it exists. That's how I have to protect my child. And when I walk into a homeowner on Long Island that says, on my way out, be as white as you can be, do you know what that does to you as a human being when you have to work in those capacity? Susan, you won't get that. I would get that. Dorothy
But
would get
let
that.
me give you the flip side of that,
Go ahead.
Moses. Okay, so I look like I'm this, I'm just white, right? I'm just a white person. So people think they can talk to me about discrimination about Jewish people, okay? Whatever they think, the ethnic, that I don't look this way, that I'm not Jewish. You know how that hurts, that they think they're going to just talk to me and discriminate. So there's discrimination of all kinds. They see you, they see your color, so they think that they can talk to you. Or that's one form of discrimination. There's another form of discrimination where they think they can talk to you because they think you're one of them. They think you're another, that you're going to hate the same as they hate. That's to me is disgusting too. That hurts just as much to me when somebody thinks they're going to talk to me either about my own ethnicity because they don't understand, they don't see it in me, or they think that I'm going to agree with them on their own hate. And as realtors, we have an obligation, as Moses said earlier, not to be what we considered in the past to be polite, but we have an obligation to stand up and say, no, that's not right. That's not acceptable. It's part of protecting it's part of our job, protecting the protected classes, is to stand up and say no.
You know, one of the things, and I think Moses had touched on it a bit early, and then I'm going to do this real quick. Then we're going to go to love letters. So you all open your hearts to some love letters and some personal letters because it's a passion. But I want to stay on that for a minute because cancel culture is really, really strong. So now if I disagree with you, you may go out there and cancel me. You know, yesterday I was in another panel and there was an anonymous writing in there because somebody mentioned that it takes a village, something. You know, I come from a village. I come from an actual village. So it takes a village to me is an American saying. I cannot say that to a lot of people, and I really do not understand the it takes a village thing, but it means something different to me. And I think the statement in that particular meeting was, well, I don't understand how a realtor of her experience and caliber does not understand it takes a village. I had to respond saying, my village is not your village. It's very different. The same way I look at diversity, I understand and see it differently. I'm not going to push that on you. So the cancel culture is out there, and I understand we have to say something when we see it and we disagree with it. But in teaching the course also on the fair housing courses, when I ask the students, why don't you say something? Well, I don't want this top producer to not let me show their property. I don't want to be the thorn in the side of I don't want to be the troublemaker. The two of you are here because we say what we think and we believe what we think. So in terms of cancel culture, you have a minute or two to address that. And then we're going to talk about some love letters that I'd love to write to a few people and tell them to cut it out. So what do you think of cancel culture within our realtor industry? Moses?
All right. I think it's something that is brewing, and it's really going to be the detriment of our organization, if you will, across the country, no matter whether you're part of a realtor organization or part of a community group. I think it is brewing to the extent that the freedom to say your piece and to debate healthy is going to be taken out of the equation.
Now, hold on a minute, Moses. I want to just jump in there. Sorry to cut you off, but I want you to tie it into our Realtor NAR Code of Ethics, Article 10-5. Why don't we look into that? Let's just get right into it right now.
All right, Dorothy, since you wanted me to go there, I'll go right there. I think
Right now,
look,
because I'm not going to let you get off. So I'm going to read it to our fellow realtors so they know what we are talking about. 10-5, which is the new code of ethics article that was added. And I'm just briefly going to go there, which says what? 10-5 says realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. This came into effect November 2020. And since we've looked at that differently. I see it differently. We all both see it differently. So let's go ahead and address that, saying that what? With regards to this new addition to our code of ethics, and we're talking about stifling speech, go for it, Moses. And then
all right,
Suzanne, you can come
since
on.
you hit it, since you narrow it down, I'll go right into it. So, like I said previously, I think the origination of it was meant well. From an organization perspective, NAR wanted to make sure that we stand out as professional. That's what we promote. We're not just licensee. We were held to this higher standard, and this is where they were going with it. But the minute it was explained that this freedom of speech is not being tempered because you're a private organization, I think many has taken it to a different level at that point, because okay, that was meant for government to not tell the citizens that you cannot do X, Y, and Z. That's where the freedom of speech was. That's where the Constitution was like, First Amendment, whatever it was, that was um, hanging its hat on. But now the private entity that we're part of as realtor organizations now taking it a step further, and now that's where you have the real cancel culture, where we have gotten policies and procedures in place, bylaws in place that are so heavy-handed that your freedom to actually debate is being cut slowly out of you to freely express yourself. And that is going to be the danger of the association in its longevity. And here's what I mean. If you go, and NAR has a course, it's called the Realtor Excellence Leadership Resource, I believe is what it is. When you go through that course, towards the tail end, it talks about how many boards had to scramble to the tail end to change bylaws because they didn't have volunteers.
Yes.
And that's the danger that NAR is probably going to end up with this 10-5, because it's being used in its way it's being done now outside of what it's really meant for initially. Is whether Dorothy, and I went on a rampage on a social media and just bash, someone out of nowhere. That's wrong. That I can't condone, because if we're going to be professionals, we have to have that, that professionalism at all time. But when you're going to use it as a weapon in a boardroom, that is wrong. That's where we're going to self-destruct and implode ourselves as a viable organization.
I appreciate that. And for those of you joining us, do understand that this is our opinion. This is what we think, and this is how we are understanding things. And we are going to have different experience, but at least we need to talk about it. So Susan, what is your point? And what's your point of view regarding 10-5?
I completely applaud 10-5, and I'm completely in the opposite opinion of Moses, as much as I respect him. But in my mind, there is no reason, I don't see that it would ever take away healthy discussion. Healthy discussion is what you need. You need to be open about discrimination. You need to talk about all the different types of discrimination, and you need to talk about implicit bias. You need to talk about everything. However, and part of what we haven't done is talk enough, but there is no reason that this is, and I know it sounds corny, but it's a club, okay? We hold ourselves to a higher standard. As a realtor, there is no way you would ever you're not allowed as a realtor to be discriminating against any of our protected classes, to do hate speech. So 10-5 says all that. And it is not any kind of, when you became a realtor and you took your classes and you do your code of ethics, we stand for higher things. Okay, we stand for non-discrimination. So in my mind, all that does is make sure that the people that are realtors are up to the challenge of doing the right thing at all times, in every occasion, everywhere they live, whether it's in a boardroom or whether it's out to dinner or wherever they are. As a realtor, you are always a realtor and you're always held to these higher standards at every time. So to me, I don't see it that way. As I see it, always we should be able to continue our discussions, and we should always, and I don't see it as impeding our discussions. I look at it differently.
Well, I appreciate that's two different points of view. Of course, I see it very differently also. My opinion doesn't matter here. I'm just going to have them go for it. How do you like that? Woohoo, we're doing great so far, I think. We are going to move on, and I think towards the end, we'll wrap it up again and just summarize what we have talked about here. But now we want to talk about love letters. And part of my bringing love letters or personal letters or whatever you all want to call it is because we're in a frenzied market. Everybody's having emotional whatever and trying to outbid and putting in ridiculous offers. Love or personal letters, and for anyone who's not a realtor, is basically a buyer writing a letter to the homeowner. And sometimes, and the reason I'm bringing it up as part of our fair housing discussion is sometimes these letters do cross the line. So I'm going to have Suzanne begin this discussion with love letters. And I want to know a few things whilst you're talking about it. Well, what sort of effect, if any, do love letters have on the negotiations, if it is? Also want you to talk a bit about whether or not buyers agents need to understand the potential violations when they pass along this love letters to a listing agent, and what is the obligation of the listing agent to pass it on? Go for it.
Thank you for this, because this is one of my personal pet peeves, whatever you want to call it. It drives me insane. I list a lot of property, luckily, and I see a lot of abuse of this. Yes, it is completely a potential form of huge discrimination. I had one, for example, very recently on a listing. I had multiple offers, and they not only included a love letter, but they included a picture of themselves. So just in case you wanted to make sure that, you could see what color their skin was for that homeowner, that was there. Obviously, I had a conversation, or whether it's obvious or not, I had a conversation. I told the agent, delete that, send me your offer again without any of this. And I explained to them, and I told them what they need to do. I said, you need to start, educating yourself. And this person was a broker owner. Okay. That's pathetic. A broker owner sending in a violation of fair housing doesn't go very far with me. I get that, we all, and I have buyers too. I get that everybody wants to put their best foot forward. All right. They want to make sure their offer gets accepted. Sellers will look at these things, and they can affect their decision-making very easily. So you have to be really, really careful how you do it. I have a couple of tips for any brokers that are on, or agents. One thing is, if you are the buyer's agent, call the listing agent, explain to them that you're not going to be writing a love letter. And it's not because your buyer has any less love for the house, but because could be a potential fair housing violation. That way, if the agent is not following fair housing and is passing those letters along, that way, when they say, well, how come this one didn't? Well, this one is actually following fair housing. But she said to tell you that clients, I just say clients love the house. You can talk about the staircase. You can talk about this, I'm into antique homes. You can talk about that amazing balcony. You can talk about the wainscoting. You can talk about the fireplace being wood burning. What you can't talk about is, I want to put my Christmas tree next to the fireplace. Why? Because not everybody celebrates that. Okay. Not everybody is celebrating that. Can you include a picture? Absolutely not. Why? Because not everybody's the same color. And what if that homeowner picks that person because of the color of their skin or something in the picture? So you want to be very careful. And what I do for my listings is I say on them that there will be, and I don't even have to ask the owner, because I have my duties to fair housing. I don't have to ask the seller for their permission. I do explain to the seller why we won't have love letters. I explain it very nicely nicely to them, but I put right in the listing, love letters will not be accepted because they are potential fair housing violation.
That's
So
very
it's
nice.
right, it's right in my MLS in the instructions for multiple offers. So that way they know ahead of time, they're told. So hopefully I get, and then when I still get them because they don't bother to read, then I simply say, remove this, take the Fairhaven class, take these classes, make sure you're aware of what goes on.
Okay, I like that. I'm going to have a follow-up. Moses, what do you think?
Dorothy, I think my first substantive contact with my client, whether be it a buyer as a buyer's agent or with a seller, I let them know my position in this transaction. We're not here to make friends. We're not here to bring emotion into the transaction. You're hiring me to negotiate on your behalf. And in that capacity, whether your best friend wants the house or wants to make an offer, they're going to compete equally because it's a business decision. I think that lays the land for any kind of emotional letter to come along and all that to be out of my client's intention to make any decision. However, in my 25 plus year career, I must have seen 2 love letters come across my desk. I don't know if because I make it that clear to them that, listen, we're here to conduct business. And I work in Queens and I get all different cultures. They come in with half the price offer and all type of thing. And I said, listen, this is the United States of America. This is how business is done. This is the price of the house. This is what we're looking for. And it's very clear cut. I think you got to be stern to make sure you don't bring in more liability than you need to in any capacity to the transaction or to anyone in there. So, and I think that's the model that I've always used. I make it clear my clients is not going to entertain any type of emotional letter. So that structures it right off from the top. So that's how I curve love letters in my practice.
I know, I think they said we have a question from Elisa there. I'll go right back to that in a minute, but let me just follow up here because both of you had said some really good things, which I believe, which is, basically make it very clear up front in my MLS listings. And I do a lot of REO, but again, when I get a love letter on an REO property, I'm saying to the agent, really look at the house. My people are not here. We don't care about that. And I think it's funny. But anyway, but what I try to do with my clients who actually live in the properties, it's a listing and buyer, interview statement in that we're not going to consider that. We're not going to consider that. And if it's going to go into the multiple listing service, there's always an additional section, which Susan puts in her comments. It's there. I'd put the same in the comments and just add my client's signature to that and say, this is it. Go check the documents. No love letters allowed. So again, the conversation in the beginning to make sure you're establishing your parameters within which you would be working with them is, I think, absolutely outstanding. Chris, do you want to give me the question for them?
Yeah, so Elisa asks, how is that agents, brokers, etc., think that these letters are okay? We still get them. Our agents are not permitted to use them. Best not to use at all. So it's kind of a statement, I guess, a statement and a question.
Did anyone want to respond to that? I agree with Elisa's statement, but again, I think it has to boil down to education. We can say whatever we want. We keep getting it, but we need to educate our membership to understand it's a potential liability. It's a huge pit because once you go down that rabbit hole, there's no coming out of it. So I think that it's important. What do you think, Sue?
I think also, agents get very involved in, as you mentioned, Dorothy, we all know we're in this insane market that really, I don't know any people that really like it. It's terrible. And agents are so feverish to make sure that they don't miss out, that their client doesn't miss out. Maybe they've lost 7. So they use it as an excuse to forget what they've learned conveniently. Okay. Wow. And here's another thing. Pose this question. All right. You get a seller, and I have heard all of these statements. I can tell you the stuff I've heard over the years is just unbelievable, but I've heard it all. For example, so that's why I say it doesn't happen in Long Island. It happens everywhere. I mean, it happened in Long Island, but it happens everywhere. Okay. So you'll get a seller and they say, well, my neighbors want me to get a good neighbor for this house. Well, what does that mean? They want to get around the fact that they want somebody that's the same color as them. So if they're white, they want, generally speaking, I've heard it from white clients, My neighbor said, you know, that we want, make sure you get good neighbor, that, you know, somebody that's white. And so you want to say, well, how are you going to answer that? How do you answer that? And my answer generally has been, well, I generally always like a green buyer. Their color's green. What is that? That's the color of money. So that's how I've answered that question. And then I've also explained to them that, you know, it's also against the law. I can't do that. I can't decide that, other than the fact that I like green clients.
Okay, well, Moses, you know I have to go back to the statement you made when you went on that listing appointment, and the seller ended up saying that you should try to be as white as possible. I want you to, and I know I don't want to go back because those things are emotionally draining, and I understand that. But in that moment, what did you truly want to say to that person, and how did you handle it?
I can't express that on this conversation if I truly want to be, but I have to tell you, I had to, one, I had my kids with, they were sitting literally 200 feet in my truck, and we were going to Wild Burger right after. That was that was the plan. And when he said that to me, it's like if someone just put a knife through you, and then you have to take back a step and said, okay, what do you do from here as a as a society? How do you fix this? Okay, when you're licensed and you're professional and you mess up, that's one thing. But when you have to deal with it, like Susan said, the neighbors wanting to have the same color or whatever as their neighbor, we have to educate. And at that point, I said to him, I would deeply have to, as much I've spent an hour in the house and give him all the bells and whistles of staging and getting everything done. And he followed me to the T, because the house did come on the market exactly the way I presented him what would make it sell, but it wasn't through me. I had to walk away. I said, I can't engage in your listing, because in my profession, I am taught and I'm educated that we cannot condone any type of fair housing discrimination. And what you're asking me to do, I can't just bring, whether only white buyers here, anyone who comes with the ability to pay and can afford this property, I have to bring them to this house. And I walked away just because it's just the right thing. Is it going to teach him a lesson? That's just life to tell whether that message was sent. But I did go back and look at the listing, all the color code, everything that I educated him on what to do. The house was sold through another agent, and it was a white agent that took that listing. So I just went back to do my due diligence to see how did it follow through and how did it all ended up being. But that's to show you that it's still prevalent. Susan, Dorothy, the one thing that I want to end with today that you know that really bothers me as a realtor.
Why? Wait a minute. It's not over. Why you?
Okay, all right. I think we're at the clock here. All right, so I'll end at that. But to follow through with that is when I approached my kids after that, I couldn't have a burger, no matter how delicious it was at that point. I took them, they had their burger, but they had no idea, no matter how tasty that wild burger was after, it was tasteless to me at that point because of what has transpired. Those are the experience that many of you will never understand. And that's why I'm so vocal about where I stand with fair housing. And when I go into boardrooms and people come up with all these beautiful language and all these policies, and then you ask them, who in that room made this decision? Did you had me in there? Did you had another colorful person in there to help make that decision? And when the answer is no, you haven't moved the needle because you really didn't care about what you're going to come out with. You care how good it looks on paper. And that's just the sad reality.
I understand and I agree. And this is going to be in the other series, which will be our diversity and inclusion series, because we do need to also look at our volunteerism when we put things on the table. Are we truly a part of the dance, or are we just being invited to the party to look good? Do we look good on the screen? Because we can say, I've sat on several meetings recently on several state and local associations. And every time that statement is made, oh, we are a diverse group. It's offensive to me because you're only looking at it based on color. Are you truly going to listen to what I have to say? Do you care about my opinion, or am I considered a troublemaker or a disruptor because I don't agree with you? And in our position when it comes to fair housing, knowing that it is based on my emotional state, it's not maybe you did something wrong, but fundamentally you're making me feel less than. That's unacceptable. So even if you're doing it and not saying it outright, but I am feeling less than in your company, you're right, Moses. If you go to the boardroom and decisions are being made, but my voice is not being heard, why are we still there though? Why are we still there? What's the impact? We can address that, then I'll move on to something else. What do you think? We say fair housing.
Well, you said it. You said it much more eloquently than I put it across, and that's that's the question that I think whoever is listening here and whoever the leadership that's making these decisions have to come to that realization that don't strike me out because you don't want to hear what I have to say, because how are you going to fix the problem?
True.
And I think until we come to that realization that.
No, go ahead, Moses.
Go
finish.
ahead, Susan.
Gonna come in. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
finish, Moses.
Because what you said was true. Like, we're now walking away saying that we were never heard. We were never, because what we have to say doesn't count in the majority here. We're counted out. So how are you going to fix the problem? I'm telling you what I'm feeling. I'm telling you what I've experienced firsthand. But if that's too much work for you to go that angle or that route, then what's the point in me being part of the association or being part of the board? Because you're not fixing problem.
Exactly. Go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, you're talking about inclusion, and true inclusion means that you're not just a token person sitting so you can say, I've got this color and that color on my board. So exactly. True inclusion would mean that you're actually being listened to and taken into consideration. That's what true inclusion is, right?
I think
well,
so.
Doesn't it go back, Dorothy, doesn't it go back where people ask you, what's the difference between equality and equity? It's fairness. That comes down to fairness. That's what you're looking for, all angle.
I fully agree with that, but I think what we also have that within our code of ethics, we understand and we have to look at it, because as realtors who are practicing in this climate now, it's just ramped up a lot, and it's now more visible that there are many disparities. But sometimes you're put in a position where there are so many people that are shouting to be heard, so there's a lot of noise. But again, if the leadership is coming out with lots of rules, policies, and procedures, but not listening to the entire group and then making decisions that would positively affect us. When we have situations or legislations or legislation, potentially proposed legislation coming from New York State, our legislators up there, who I think based on whatever the events of Long Island have gotten a knee-jerk reaction saying, we got to come out with this, got to come out with this. So we got a flurry of things coming at our real estate industry. We need the leadership in place also to address the fact that, yes, fair housing is important. Yes, we need to understand it. And yes, we need to make sure we know the laws and are not just saying yes to knowing it, but we truly know and understand the laws, and we truly know and understand the history. So going through all of that, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes towards the end when we're almost there to summarize your thoughts. I want you to try to explain to me whether or not you think housing is fair. We have fair housing, we throw it around. It's fair housing, Mom. We have to take the fair housing course, and I take it every 2 years. Oh, I'm so happy about it. Whatever. Do you think housing is fair? Susan, go for it.
No, I think that we are so far behind in our education, and it's still the same thing. Agents, when you talk to agents about why not to write a love letter, and their answer to you is not, thank you, I'm embarrassed, or, thank you, I should know, you know what, I got caught up, or it's just, they answer you one word, noted. Like, just take my offer, let's get the deal together. To me, that's, they don't understand why is it that we're still putting fair housing and the back burner. I think it's it's not it's still the same as it was to me as from many years ago, that it's just one of those things that right now it's sort of a trendy thing that's going on because of this and that happened, and the lawmakers are involved and blah blah blah. But it's not really, people are not internalizing what fair housing really means, and it's not fair, and we have a long way to go to make sure that it is fair. I mean, if you talk about mortgages, for example, mortgages, some of the things that need to be included with mortgages, we need to start putting in rentals for credit history, counting rent and utility, so that people that are in apartments that are currently renting, if that's counted as part of their credit history, they may be able to get a mortgage. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to still be done to get us to a better place so that more people can actually become homeowners, get that mortgage, get that, how do they get that credit score up? If they're renting and rent doesn't count as a credit score and utilities don't count, you've got people that are not getting what they need to get as far as their credit history bumped up so that they can buy. There's so many things that we need to work on. So no, fair housing, unfortunately, has a long way to go. Again, I come back to education as the most important thing we can do, and try to get people to understand why it's important.
Okay.
And more people who are in positions to enforce it too. So, when you have a listing, every listing agent should be putting down no love letters. These are the kind of things. So there's lots of things that need to keep going in my book.
Okay, and I will add to that, but Moses, go ahead. What do you think? Do you think housing is fair? And if not, go ahead and tell us why not.
Absolutely not. I didn't grow up in the 60s. I wasn't born then, but I can tell you from history and looking at where we are today. And I think Susan hit some strong points on it. My strong point in teaching is agency, financing, investment. That's my thing. Numbers is my thing. And I had a client who came by and did from a minority, and wanted to get into first time home buyer, and went to the bank, did the credit and all, and the DTI was a little bit out of whack, and because the credit score was a little there, and the education that the person didn't had he or she paid down one of the credit card and maybe redo the scoring within a 3 week or period and get that score up. Now they're getting a lower interest rate, they're competing equally, and that's where you get the fairness of equity. You can make $1 million and you can have no debt, and you can walk in the bank and you get the best of rates and everything. But now you have someone who's an average person making 400,000 a year or 200,000 a year, whatever the number is, but they have so much more debt to accumulate because they got student loan, they got all that life brings with it, but no one educated them how to make that platform a level playing field so that they can equally get the same financing, and you're not pushing a higher rate or a bigger debt on someone's already in debt. How do we get that education? And I educate them simply like, listen, you don't have to get a PMI. You can do a lender paid PMI. It takes the DTI down. Do a rescore in 2 weeks. The score is up in the 700, and wow, they fit in the box all of a sudden. So that's the kind of education that we have to make sure the consumer gets. That's one. And then two, the education from realtor. I think realtors are still lagging significantly in where they need to be. And where does this come down to? I think it was just poorly from the broker perspective. I mean, I taught something on vicarious liability, and to this day, I can't understand when I see the action of so many brokers, and they're in leadership as well. And then you wonder how we're still stuck in this phase, because we've never gone out of that mindset that been taught year after year. And had this really come down from NAR when we had a code of ethics that encouraged segregation? I don't know, but it started there to some point, because that was the norm in the early 1900s, but now we're here. We should be out of this by now, but it's sadly still there. There is no fair housing.
You know, we've talked about quite a few things, and fundamentally it says education, education, education. So we know it. How do you think we should do our best, in your view, to try to educate our membership, our fellow realtors? Again, there's a lot of things flying at us. We say we have to educate. In the classes I teach, and I teach a lot of fair housing, diversity, and ethics and whatnots. And the attitude you get, sometimes I have what I call my stalkers. They come into every class I teach. They're amazing. Then you have the people who, I'm there because I have to be here. So they're not paying attention anyway. They're there because they have to get the hours. They're there because it has to be fulfilled. It's part of their core class. How do you think that we may use some other level of creativity maybe to bring the information to our membership so that they would follow through? For example, NAR's Fair Haven course. I think it's phenomenal. I have taken it. I think sometimes it's one of the most racist places I've been because I had to wear different hats. I had to take off my training hat. I had to be a buyer. I was just crazy in that Fair Haven community, and I'm glad I left it after I took the course. But one of the things I had suggested here within my association, because I teach, is to say that, I'm bringing forth a diversity and inclusion course. And one of the prereqs, like you're in college, right? Take the NAR Fair Haven class so I know how to address it before you sign up for this course. I thought it would be a good thing, Take NAR's Fair Haven before you sign up for this diversity inclusion course. It's a prereq. This way, just give me your score so I know where we're going wrong. I thought that was fun. But again, people go to, I'm an independent contractor. I said, fair housing is a no play. You have to know it because it's not something you talk about once a month. It's a daily discussion. Every day, somebody says something. You either have to check them and say, we shouldn't do that. Even my kids check me all the time when, Mom, fair housing violation. Oh my God, I can't even say anything without being checked by my board of directors. So you think about it and say, what do you think are some best practices we can try to put in place when it comes to educating our membership and ourselves? Moses?
Well, before I hit there, let me just let you know, I talk to myself quite frequently. So my kids would ask me and I would say to them, I'm an independent contractor and I'm having a board meeting. So that's why I talk to myself. So, yeah, now, can you please repeat your question? I threw myself.
We have talked a lot and we spent some time on education. We've said it, we have to educate our membership. So what do you think, a couple of things, how do you think we can bring more education that our membership will understand and pay attention to creatively or out of the box? And what are some best practices that you have that help you within our fair housing realm and making sure that we do not break the, laws that are on the books?
So from a personal perspective, I have sat on everything education since I got into this business. Every education management committee, whether at local or state, if you look at my history, I've always been, because I believe the foundation to anything that is going to be strong must be built on education. If you don't have it up here, you can't express it out there. Okay? That's my first rule of thumb. I think the biggest flaw we have in our industry is the brokers who are supposed to supervise the agent are lacking education. In New York particular, was it because we had the grandfather law? I don't know. Because, for years they were grandfathered out. They didn't have to keep up with education. Did that get us to where we are today? I don't know, but it might have been a contributor to it. But I think as practitioner, whether you're an agent or a broker, you have to always remember you're a businessman or woman. You are running your own business and you have to make sure that all your action, you have to, you're liable for your action. And the broker is the supervising agent, but all the agent under him or her has vicarious liability. So we have to make sure we have that ingrained in everyone that's practicing, that your action is going to come back to bite you if you're not on top of your game, and to make sure that you know what you're doing. Too often, if I still have to get a call at the weird hours of my night that, oh, is it an oversight that you are not compensating a broker agent? I said, do you understand what a broker agent is? Do you understand what a, you know, just minute stuff to that degree, that if I have to still explain that to a cooperating broker who wants to come in, I said, no, it's not an oversight. I don't know you from a hole in the wall, and my broker doesn't know you from a hole in the wall. Why would we compensate you? Why don't you come in as a buyer's agent? We will lovingly compensate you to come and sell our listing, but keep the liability on your side. Don't bring it on my side. I don't know you. My seller doesn't know you. If I have to go and say that today, then we have missed the mark greatly. And I'm sorry, I'm not gonna down the association, but I'm gonna let them know, you pay attention. That if that's the magnitude of education that's still missing, how the heck are they going to get fair housing right when they can't even figure out how to get agency right?
Outstanding. And we are on board with that. Go on, Susan.
I
What do you-
completely agree with that, Moses. I'm not even going to go into it, but I completely agree with you on that. Thank you for that one. Again, we already said it, it's education, but again, you've got to set yourself up as an example. You've got to do things across the board. So when you get a listing, you've got to do those things like put it in writing that, you're not going to look at love letters, every day, like we said, every day you have to think about fair housing every day of your life. Even if you're on vacation, you got to think about how do you make things better. You have to always set yourself up as an example. You always have to set yourself up within your company. Brokerages do need help. Also, I used to be a teacher a bazillion years ago, so everything is multi-lessons, right? So I'm RPAC chair this year for my local board. So my personal thing that I'm going to do is I'm doing ethnic. I want all different ethnicities to bring in their foods and do a RPAC fundraiser with that, so that I'm incorporating, embracing. If you embrace your ethnicity and share that, I grew up, sometimes it's hard to be proud of who you are. So you have to learn to be proud of who you are and embrace it and share it. So sharing your ethnicity, always being a leader, always trying to set an example, and getting the brokers involved in education. Nutshell.
I think I like the, bringing in your different foods from different countries, because we've done that. We've done that locally here within my board association, where we bring different foods and we taste and we talk about it. I think we bring the foods, but we don't really get a chance to take the tour. And now that, when I say take the tour, now that we are all digitally based, we can take tours of different countries. And that has been really exciting, because I did one with Long Island. We went to Nigeria, South Africa, and of course, Ghana. That was exciting. And I loved every minute of it. And that is also part of the association sharing the information so that we can all be a part of this. These are series, yes, I put it together, but then I made sure we put it out for anybody who wanted to be a part of it, because I thought the conversations that we would be having here would be phenomenal and really express our thoughts and put your positions out there, that people know to reach out to you, because I think you've been very, very, very great sources and influences in my life. So just before we get on there, I wanted to go back to just a quick touch on fair housing, that we do need it. We do need it right now. And again, what would we like to see from our, again, I'm going to go to from our local, state, and national associations, because I know our current president, Charlie Opler, who's out of New Jersey, thank goodness, our backyard's yay, it's made that a focal point of his. And just saying that you have to get, Suzanne, you have the At Home with Diversity certification. I have it too, Moses. We have
2007.
Yes, I took that. I've had that for years. We have to take the implicit bias course. And of course, we have to take the NAR Fair Haven course. We take all that and we say, yay, I got it. What are we doing with it? What are we doing with it? Just saying I got it just to satisfy a call to action from our president, to me, is useless. What am I going to do with that it's going to have an impact in my association, locally, state, national? What are we looking for from our leadership? Moses, start with you.
Well, I have the same thought process. I've done diversity since 2007. The Ronald Reagan Hotel, I think, in DC, and it's just because of who I am. I want to make sure I'm educated in all aspect of it, and I have the same exact thought. I'm seeing everyone going up on Facebook and all the media. Oh, I've done home with diversity, and I'm like, so what are you gonna do with it now?
Yeah.
What is it solving? And that's what I said. I'm so worried that the PR is taking the precedence of what really needs to be done. How are we getting into the grassroots of where we are, and how are we getting out of it? Because telling me you've sat online and got a course done doesn't change anything. And that's where you and I have to sit in a boardroom, and I miss some of the in person, really sit down and says, okay, so how are we going to move this pendulum? Where are we missing the mark? I understand education is one component of it, but we also have to have healthy discussion, and we have to hear each other out. Like, okay, you're seeing one side, but you're missing the other part. That's never, it's going to be all nice on paper, but are we moving the pendulum as to where we're really going to make a change in society? And that's my struggle as a, looking at this all. And I'm, I gave Charlie Appler kudos to come out, and he took a beating when all this came down. That's we all been president, we've all known what we have to do, but as an industry, are we making a dent in really, bringing forth change?
You had to come up with one thing, Moses, before I go to Susan. What would you like to see? One thing, just come up with one thing. Yeah, we've all got this PR going on. What would you like, boots on the ground? What would you like to see, even though we can't get together with each other? What would you like, one thing, what would you think would help move the pendulum forward?
I think if we can do more of, I started the Realtor Care Week, where we got together and let individual from all walks get to work hand in hand, get to understand your culture, who we are, how we operate, how we think, just to get to know people on a better basis. I think that may change the perspective in people's mind. Now, not all who has a urban, or all who has our outlook, our way of connecting might be different, but what our motives are. Are we driving the same um desire to make sure this place we live in is a better place? And I think collaboration needs to, just like anything. When I did leadership, the NYSAR Leadership Academy, in my class, 14 was sat in my class, that's a bond that I've created for life.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're separating. As the more digital we go, we're separating, everyone coming with their big ideas, but it's never getting put to work in a a personal base. If
I,
that brings anything to the table.
I appreciate that response. Go ahead, Susan. Same question to you before the last, another one point. Want to see, what would you like to see from our leadership, local, state, and national, do about fair housing? I appreciate the PR and I appreciate the focus on that this year, but what else do you think you'd like to see?
I guess I want to see, one thing would be more teachers that can relate to the average realtor, so that they understand that fair housing isn't just an obligation that they have to do so that they don't get in trouble. So, teachers that I mean, I think back to classes I've taken, and I can remember that I can't remember anything anymore, but I remember the names of the teachers that taught me really basically fair housing in high school and in college, and things that stuck with me for my whole life, because I had these great teachers that impressed upon me, wow, this isn't, because if you think about it, the end result of fair housing, the end result, if we are able to accomplish fair housing, is you're going to have awesome neighborhoods. You won't have boring, all the same neighborhoods, because diversity and culture brings love and life to a neighborhood. So what we will get out of fair housing, if we can actually accomplish it, instead of just making it just something you got to do, and I can't do this and I can't do that, but I got to take my classes. If agents, realtors really understand the obligation that we have, it's awesome. It's really a great, you get to live, you get to make a living, and you get to help people, and you get to change whole neighborhoods. Think about the big picture of what you're doing. And when you think about that, that's powerful. That's why I say think about fair housing every day, because every day it's a different thought you might have about why it's so important. So when you get to that end result, if we're ever able to get there, we're going to have some great neighborhoods. We're going to have some, wonderful places to live. And I think that's really what makes it good. So back to education, I guess, more, better.
And Dorothy, if I can just touch 2 seconds on what I said, and it just to bring light to it. When I did the Realtor Care Week, those were realtors that we got boots on the ground, and we did hand in hand, took care of another realtor who was either suffering from ailment or couldn't do. But the day's work together has created such a strong bond that no matter where I travel, if I needed to call up on anyone in that area to say, hey, I'm in town, I need this, that's how you build community. It may seem like it's a very small step, but it's the mindset that you starts to change in individual that is gradually going to help you grow the message and get it to where we need. Because I may have had a bias of wanting to be in a certain neighborhood. Oh no, but now I'm collectively going as a group and we're working. And then I might say, oh, now I have a different perspective of what goes on, or what, it's how you grow. Paper's good. Practice makes it perfect.
I thank you for both for that. So now what you're going to do is we have some time. Do we have any questions, Chris? Any question, comment?
No, there's just one
Liz
comment.
has
from
raised her hand. Is it possible to tell her to put it in the Q&A? Liz English, I think, raised her hand, but I can't see it. It's Q&A. Do you want to ask her what she wants? Liz, put your question in the Q&A. While she figures that out, I'm going to give both of you, I'm going to start with Suzanne. If you want to give us a wrap up or your summary of how you see fair housing, where you hope to see it go, and that same thing will go to Moses.
I guess what I see is what I already said, that I see the end result of putting diversity into neighborhoods as something that as my end goal. The more diversity that goes into a neighborhood, I think the more magical the neighborhood becomes. And touching on what Moses said, also, I think about, taking a bus trip after the flooding downstate, and being on a bus with a bunch of realtors and having that connection. It is so important to be able to make that connection with other realtors, and always trying to set that example. And it's a fight. I guess it's going to continue to be a fight for fair housing, but we just have to keep going around until we can get that fight more. Little tiny increments I'll be happy with. If we can just see little increments of improvement on fair housing, if we see, less people doing love letters and more people involved, more people taking classes, more people interested in not just doing it because they have to. So if we can sort of do that, whatever way it becomes, whether it's through more cultural, whether it's through more, realtors getting together and helping and volunteering, I think that would be amazing. So we continue the fight, I guess, is my summary.
Great. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Moses?
Dart, I'm going to start with this. My wife's a public school teacher. Throughout the pandemic, my life has been at risk because she goes every week in person, and I have to make sure at the end of the week she's tested and she's negative. That's been my life through the entire pandemic. I have my 2 kids, they're not teenagers. They were babies when I was in leadership. And they have traveled through all of the real estate. And I remember there were days when I plane and you could see people swirling in their seats like, oh no, don't bring those kids next to me. And then at the end of the flight, I was complimented how well they behaved. They did not know that my daughter was a jet setter since she was 3 months old, and she is not fear of flying anywhere. So they have been travelers. But why do I say that? It's how much we expose ourselves in
Yes.
society, and how we bring that culture from a very early on. They both went to Head Start. I was on the leadership of New York City Head Start, and we brought in culture food for every parent to try different cultural food, and their native flags and what's not, just to give that exposure. And I think that exposure, sadly, as a country, as much as big and grand we are, we only have pockets of it, and a large deal of our country is just segregated from what really. And it's like Susan said, you take a bus trip and you go in and you find out for yourself, and you make that observation. That's really going to take us where we need to go. And my frustration really from all this, having spent so much time at the association level and in the gutters trying to make a difference, and seeing so little of change, regardless of how much education had brought about. It's kind of setting me that I can look my kids in the eye now and say, hey, we've made a big difference. It's going to be a better place for you tomorrow. My wife comes home every so often and say, kids coming to school hungry. That's a concern that she has. Those kids can't be educated properly because hunger is on their mind, not education. And we're living in the biggest country in this country, the United States, and you have kids that are hungry in classroom. Those are things that we need to start looking at as a society and say, how do we build up from the ground up and make sure we all have a level playing field, at whatever life brings to us. So I hope I that helps to bring some of my perspective into this.
I have to tell you, your perspective has been wide, broadening, but everything we talked about, guys, has come down to working as a community, working together, and from the ground up, in little by little steps, we will hopefully be able to understand our housing priorities, our housing laws, and make sure that we try to treat everybody fairly. We always say, well, we want to treat everybody equally. I say, you can't treat me equally because Moses expects something else. Chris and Susan all do. I personally believe that if we do our best to be fair in our treatment to all, we will make baby steps to get to what we need to accomplish within our fair housing process and understand our fair housing laws better. So I know it's, Chris, we don't have any questions, right? We still have 13 minutes.
No.
Do we have a question, Chris?
No, Elizabeth just wanted to thank you and said you're so awesome, all three of you.
Well, I'm glad everybody got, we have 13
Thank you,
minutes.
Liz.
But I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but we are going to give you guys the opportunity to say whatever. It's going to be a free forum right now. And then I will wrap it up on the end and remind everybody that we do have our sponsors, ASAP Mortgage and Homebridge. Next Friday, we're going to talk about fair lending, which is going to be a battle royale because she gets no questions either. And I've known her for a very long time, and she's highly outspoken, and it should be a very good event to address discrimination in lending and, redlining and how agents treat VAs and FHA funding, and how we are not proactive about presenting the office correctly to our sellers and try to discourage our sellers from, considering somebody with a VA certificate. It's just been one of those very difficult points. So again, when we talk about housing is not fair, that's where I see some inequalities in the lending aspect, not only in how realtors are treating the consumer, but how realtors are treating each other. We don't have respect for each other. We don't talk kindly to each other. We don't have the tolerance, if you have an accent, for me to take time to listen to you and try to understand what you're saying. So I think that apart from educating the public, we need to be very, very deferential and respectful to each other. And we are missing quite a bit of that sometimes. So fair housing, yes, encompasses a lot. It's a huge, unwieldy topic, but bite-sized pieces, hopefully we'll get there. Susan?
Yeah, I try to think about, who I've helped and how I can help more people that are in protected classes, How do I help more people of color? I'm very proud when I help people. I've had clients, I had a client, couple of color, and I brought them to a very white neighborhood, and I could see on their faces that they were scared to be there because they felt that they weren't going to be accepted. I saw it on their face. And it was very, very powerful. And I said to them, and I looked at him watching, he said, look, those people are slowing down to look at me. People in a car slowed down to look because I had a black couple outside the house in a real all white neighborhood. And I said to them, you know what? You guys are going to go wherever you want to go. And you're not going to sit here and be intimidated by somebody slowing. Yeah, they did slow down. You know what? And they did get into an all white neighborhood, and they have a little kid, and the little kid's been their kind of way of sort of getting into that neighborhood and making themselves feel comfortable. Their little girl on her roller skates and stuff in the neighborhood has been their way of getting to know the neighbors, and it's been great. It's been good for them. So, that's just one example, but I try to think about, and again, that's why you have to think about fair housing every single day. How do you make somebody's lives better? How do you look at your multiple offers and like we touched upon and say, okay, is this going to be okay? You have a duty to your seller, right? To get them the strongest offer. And how do you incorporate fair housing into that? That's a hard one. So there's a lot of issues that you have to think about. I'll be definitely on the mortgage one next week. I'm hoping to get involved in my company more with, I mentioned to my company that I'd be doing this, and they embraced it and said, boy, maybe you can get involved more. And it's a big company. Before, my company was small, and we were merged with a big company. So I'm happy maybe I can do more that way. So every day you have to think about, is there something else I can do? Is there some other way I can get involved and you don't know what it's going to be. You don't know what's going to happen. Just keep trying. And like we said, little by little, right?
Absolutely. Moses, do you want to give us a wrap up? We are almost done. We have about 8 minutes left.
All right. Well, I have lunch at 1, so I have plenty of time. Let me, look, I picked this business because I wanted the freedom. I like to be in control in whatever I do. And I've always taught my agents, you sell real estate, you invest in real estate. That's my philosophy in life. If you don't own real estate, how are you going to sell me real estate? What do you know to tell me about it? That's just my way of thinking. And my kids would tell you at age 11 and 13, they can underwrite a multifamily deal and tell you if it's a good buy or not. That's how I'm structured. That's what I know freedom of life is. At 1 o'clock, I have lunch. And at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be showing some beach homes. That's it, on the North Fork of Long Island. That's my schedule for today. I'm hanging out and I'm having a ball with you because this is free speech. I tell you as I see it, firsthand, my experience. You don't like it, tough luck. That's the truth that's coming out of me. If you want to make change, then listen to what I have to say, and then let's make change together. I'm tired of sitting in boardrooms and another meeting, and at the end of the day you feel like nothing has moved in the direction where it needs to be. Who has time for that? I'm not getting any younger, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna put my life in a box and just throw it away. I got plenty to do, and I know I appreciate you asking me to come on, Dorothy. You've known me for the life of me in the business, and I've always believed in fairness. I've always believed you treat people right. I teach it to my kids every day. And a big organization asked me recently, can you sit on our board? And I'm like, I don't want to sit on another board. I've done this for so long. I think I've given enough to the community where I've given what needs to be given, and hopefully we message moving forward that we maybe need to look at things a little differently. And my last say for today, as we're wrapping up here, is that as an association that promotes that we're the Cadillac of professionalism, we need to really take a dive at what we're doing and how we're doing it. Whether it's our educational system is broken, and we really need to look at that to say, how are we educating our members? And is it the right way? Is it we need to get a third party schooling, or do we need to get a whole different structure as to how we educate moving forward? That's a decision I think the associations have to make, because if we're going to leave it one message, and I know lawmakers and everyone can listen and hear this, I don't believe that our realtors or licensees are properly educated, and that is not in New York, nationwide.
Yes.
There needs to be a wide range of topic that we have to be proficient in. Sadly to say, not all of us are there, and that's what's causing you and I to have these conversations today, because the many that are not up to speed with what they need to do in the business.
I want to thank you both and for being a part of this panel. And I am sure I'm leaving with a ton of information. It has been wide ranging. We covered a lot of topics, and I want to thank you for being honest and frank in your discussion with me. And hopefully the people who are a part of this took something away, and it may be something that will come up. So I thank you all for your time. We are finishing just about 11:30. And I do want to remind you guys, we have fair lending next week, which should be another fun, open discussion with Irina Mardo of ASAP Mortgage, one of our sponsors. And we're going to talk about the different types of lending, any potential discrimination in lending. And we will post these to our YouTube channel. So I will be sharing the links with both of you so that you can have that. And I thank you again, and thank everybody for participating. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dorothy.